Hello and welcome to another Not a Recruitment Marketing podcast. I can't even remember the title as it's been a few weeks. My name is Brian Whigham, founder of Venn Digital. And today is another great show, hopefully, with another great guest, friend and colleague of mine for many, many years. And like the last podcast, where we try to introduce people from out with the recruitment marketing sector to bring some knowledge and experience and anecdotal stories of what they do. It'll be the same today, where we want a special guest who describes herself as a broadcaster, author, producer, meteorologist, climate change communicator, and a great friend of mine. It's Clare Nasir. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. It's good to be here. Yes, I suggested you could use one or two of those, but not list them. But there you go. Starting on a good note.
I could have gone on. So look, Clare, for those of you who do recognise, Clare's obviously been the face of the British weather for a long, long time, probably longer than she'll care to admit, but has obviously built a very famous and well-known career presenting live on TV for many years. And I think as Clare's career has adapted and adopted different paths, she's now become an advisor on climate change. She communicates across many platforms, live, on stage and online, all things related to the weather and meteorology, which her whole career has been based around. So the reason for bringing Clare on the show was really to talk about how the multimedia landscape has changed, going from live TV to now doing things which is basically on-demand, YouTube, LinkedIn, recorded content online, and hopefully she can share some advice on how that has evolved over time. But before we start on that, Clare, could you take us back to the beginning? Where did your career begin? How did you end up on the TV? And how has it played out since then?
Well, I think with anything to do with television, it tends to be around the back door. You don't go for a big job interview with many, many people and get the job. Sometimes it's who you know, or you just have the absolute balls to front up someone and go, listen, you should put me on television. And in fact, I was a meteorologist before I was a weather presenter. Although I was on television quite early on as a meteorologist on regional television. But I really wanted to get back to London. I've been living in Norwich, and I really wanted that buzz of live TV. So a lot of weather presenters pre-record their weather, and it's a bit soulless in a way because you're just pointing yourself at a camera and there's no sense of jeopardy, and jeopardy comes from being in a live studio environment where anything could absolutely go wrong or right. And it's the adrenaline, it's the buzz, it's the feeling that you really have to think on your feet, and it's pretty much how life is. You know, as they say, life is not a dress rehearsal, or certainly it is if you're recording the weather over and over again and you can do as many takes as you want. So I saw a few shows that I thought I'd wanted to be on. I was a civil service servant at the time. I was working behind the scenes as a meteorologist as well as presenting. And I read this book, which was just it was a lovely book by a lady called Shakti Gawain. And she was all about affirmations and sort of visualization. And she said, if you want something, visualize the person who's got your job already, going to a better job. And then you are just slipping into that job. So there's no bad karma, nothing bad's going on, but you're just imagining that they're going to be even happier than they are right now. And then you can just pretty much just sort of go through the back door and go, I'm here. And so I did that for about 6 months. And then I approached the editor of a breakfast show and just said, do you want me? And they went, yep. And that's how it started, really. So I jumped ship from the civil service, where the Met Office is part of the MOD, part of BAYS. And I went into television, breakfast television, where I presented and I was producer for 12 years.
So describe the first time. I mean, probably for this generation, they'll never experience the butterflies in the tummy because everything's, like you say, pre-recorded and done in the safety of your bedroom now, ultimately recording all these TV shows. But I think for you, going live to the nation, how many people were watching? What show were you on? And how did it physically make you feel when you were presenting live at that age you were?
Oh, my goodness. Honestly, Brian, this is no disrespect to anyone, any other part of society, but I felt like I was on death row walking to my final meal before absolutely being annihilated by some sort of, deathly trap. I felt totally vulnerable, and I also felt like I was almost naked. And I was broadcasting at the time to probably 3.5 million people. So I had been on television for a few years before that. So I'd sort of cut my teeth in regional television, which is the way to go, really. Everyone should start with a small audience who is very sympathetic to all the skills that you don't have and you're developing. But it was an amazing buzz as well. It was almost that sort of bungee jump where you're going to feel amazing, but before you step off the cliff, it's absolutely horrific. And that's how it was. And it was like that for a little while. But I think one of my natural places in life is to talk to people. And I just did that. I wasn't ever one of those very plummy or presenters who was very BBC. I had a more of a natural conversational flair, which allowed me to improvise. And the thing about weather, you don't have an auto cue. You improvise until someone tells you to not talk anymore, and you describe things in pictures. And I think that's what I did. That's what I still do.
Still do now. No, that's it. And it's like I say, you've produced your own book now as a result, or books, plural. So how's it changed? I think part of, again, the stories I'm trying to get from you and to share with my audience is how the sort of media landscape has evolved. I mean, you've gone from a very high-pressured, you go live, you present, and that takes skill, that takes discipline, that takes rehearsal and becoming an ultimate professional. In that, to nowadays, it almost feels people are just shooting from the hip. They grab a camera, they go at their iPhone, they go on LinkedIn, they go on YouTube, they go on Instagram Live. There's got to be a balance, right? And I think with our profession in recruitment, we're advising people in careers, sectors, whatever the topic may be. So I think two questions in one. How have you seen the media landscape shift from live TV to now almost on demand? And how positive or maybe negative have you seen that shift in the media landscape? Has it become a good thing in your professional opinion?
I think, I've been working in television now for over 25 years, maybe probably longer. And ratings are nothing to what they were. Your audience is much, much smaller now on network television. People don't tend to watch when something's scheduled anymore. And the audience has changed as well. It's certainly changed since we've got the millennials and the Gen Z have come through the ranks, and they don't understand a schedule. They don't understand looking in the Radio Times and going, I want to watch that program. I'll wait until that moment when it's actually ready to go live. So your set of skills have to evolve and change with it. And from my point of view, that's been a real steep learning curve. Whereas having a daughter who's now 13, there's no way that she would ever think about planning to watch something when it was just about to go live, unless it was The Sidemen and it was on YouTube. So that's one thing. I think it's been liberated in a lot of ways. I think you have to understand that the audience that you have is an intelligent audience, and they're a discerning audience, and they're not going to watch you unless you are educating, entertaining, or adding some value to their lives where they will continue to watch. And that's really key. Regulation has gone down the pan because obviously you can pretty much say and do or whatever you want. You can lie, you can be whoever you want to be. And it's smoke and mirrors. But I think it was always smoke and mirrors, to be honest, because when you think about a big news program, a lot of the personalities on the sofa were using auto cue. So they were as good as their producers and their editors and the lighting and the sound. Whereas now it's a bit more DIY, but it's not really, because people learn very quickly. The set of skills becomes almost a portfolio, and they become brilliant at what they do. However, from my background, I know now that when I work with cameramen, there's no longer a sound engineer or a lighting person a lot of the time, or even hair and makeup for me. So you just have to become multi-skilled. And I think most people now who've gone down that line, gone are the really bad videos, which a lot of people were doing, say, 12 years ago, during the sort of the early infancy of this. And now it's slick. It really is. And it's entertaining, and people want more and more. And the ratings on social media, on YouTube, etc., it's through the roof. It's massive. And now there's almost like this hybrid where the sort of the social influencers and those who are big characters and personalities are coming into mainstream and doing brilliantly well, because, as I said, the audience is an intelligent audience, and that's who they want to see. So actually network TV are sort of now understanding where this new talent is coming from, and nurturing it and bringing it into them so they can make more money. So it's almost come full circle, and both now sit quite nicely. Where it will be in the next 20 years, who knows?
And do you look? I think your personal brand, right? You know, you've been the face of the weather for, like you say, 20 odd years. I can get at you through Twitter. I can get at you through other social media platforms. I can get at you on YouTube. That you're kind of, there's many fronts that you need to manage your personal brand. A professional front, you're dealing in fact. Can you give an opinion? I think maybe for our audience, that's maybe some of the fear that managing directors, sales directors, marketing directors, or simply marketing managers, they don't know how to contend with that. They don't want to make a statement and have to retract it. They're almost scared of saying something for fear of being attacked or challenged, and suddenly you're in a debate live on LinkedIn. So again, do you see it being a positive thing where actually I've got a platform where I do build a following on Twitter, I can have a debate publicly, and the fact that I've got many platforms rather than just one channel going one direction on TV, do you feel the kind of interactivity of the modern world we live in has been a positive for presenting and communicating?
I think it's a really good point, and I can understand the fear. I really can. And I always, whenever I post or I'm part of a show, I always think about what I'm going to say beforehand, and I will double check that. There's a lot of trolling that goes on, but also if you say something which you don't mean, or is incorrect, or actually is massively offensive, people are going to take you down. It doesn't come in a form of a letter now, which gets delivered and you find it 5 days later on your boss's desk. You know, it's very instant. And I don't think that's a bad thing, although I think some social platforms are quite toxic. And I think you have to choose your audience and your platform very well and carefully, depending on what your messaging is. So if you want to be massively opinionated, then do that, but do it in an intelligent way that you can actually answer to those who are responding to you negatively. And I think people respect that as well. I mean, there are many out there who do it brilliantly and with a lot of humor. And I think that sort of dissolves some of the spikiness. But, you know, you can fall foul of these people, of your audience. You have to be clever, you know.
I get it. I've probably suffered that anxiety, or still suffer that anxiety myself. It's do you want to have to deal with it? But I think there's so many well-educated, bright, intelligent people who are not celebrities, they're not famous, they're just really good at their jobs, they've got brilliant careers, and they should have a platform to stand on and share their experiences, and hiding away in an office all day not sharing that experience just seems a missed
opportunity. With that.
And I guess that
I do agree with that. And I think some people should be front of house, and they should be saying and you know, adding or contributing to the narrative. And I do think it's people behind the scenes who should be supporting those who will add so much value in the limelight, representing their company, an organization, or a set of people. And there are ways of nurturing that. That certainly is the case. And I do think that, I'm sure we'll be talking about this in a moment, podcasting is a good way into that, because your audience is quite selective and they want to listen because they're interested in what you've got to say, because they're part of that, whether it's that sector or that belief system, etc.
Why has it been so? Why has there been this explosion? In your opinion, again, like this is somebody who does this for a living, lighting, makeup, it's all been done for you, it's been well produced to suddenly this raw, you're literally in your studio at home and we've got the technology to do it. So why has podcasting become such a platform and yeah, like where the hell did it come from? And in your opinion, why has it been such a success?
I think podcasting is absolutely amazing. It's for geeks, really, like me and you, Brian. It's for people who want to listen to stories and those who want to learn. And if you want to really drill down into something so specific, I will give you an example. I'm fascinated by fasting. I love the whole process of a water fast where you just go out without food for a day, 2 days. I think it's really good methods of actually presenting better. To be honest, if you've got a big presentation to do, don't eat for a couple of days. Everything goes to your brain and you feel absolutely adrenaline sort of junky, inspired, and you feel like you're firing on all cylinders rather than that food coma. But when you listen to a podcast like that, it's virtually like going into Encyclopedia Britannica and being able to cross-reference everything that other people are saying. So my bookcase is full of books from people who have written something really worthy who I've listened to on a podcast, because they've been a guest of one podcast. I've listened to that and gone, oh, I've got to hear more about this guy because he's got so much to say and it could improve my life. And then he's maybe been on another podcast, and it's almost like this network, this like mycelium of sort of threads sort of weaving around. You've got this big mushroom on top, which is the big subject or the big sort of over broader view of what we want to listen to in terms of podcasting. And then beneath the surface, there's absolute sort of a myriad of networks of incredible people who are doing amazing things that you want to be part of. I think and you can go down that rabbit hole and end up in a very different place to what you were even 2 or 3 days before, listening to one podcast after another. So I think I
Yeah.
think it's for geeks. I think it's for really specific things that you want to hear, or you just want a bit of a laugh. You just want to just sit back and just be entertained. Russell Brand, brilliant. He makes me howl. Not that I agree with everything he
Mhm.
says, but he's just out there. And I think
Yeah.
that type of listening to that type of conversation is infectious, and you feel like you're part of it as well.
No, brilliant answer. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think TV's just become a little bit, I don't know, just a bit dated, it feels now. And you've now got access to such interesting people with interesting opinions and experiences. And it's a privilege. It's certainly, in my opinion, it's a privilege to listen to some of these people and sharing their stories, because there's a lot of cool stuff out there. So how do you make it work, Claire? I think, again, part of this will be find a good guest. I'm lucky that I've got, again, you as a friend, and I can call on your experiences and other people who'll be on future shows. But beyond that, I think getting a good guest, getting a good topic is one thing. I then think organising, planning, structuring an interview. What advice can you give the marketeers listening to this podcast? How can they sit their MD down and say, look, I want to get you in a podcast with this person? Where do they begin? Could you give maybe 2 or 3 top tips to planning, structuring, organising, and delivering a great interview? Because that in itself is a skill, surely.
I think it is, and I think it depends on the subject and the person that you want to interview. First of all, you want to know who is your audience, who's going to be listening to this. That's really important. And then what I do mostly, which takes up more time than the actual podcast, is talk to my guest beforehand and write down, brain dump, listen to them just wax lyrical, listen to them tell the stories that they really want to tell. I tend to even record that pre-production interview, and then I write everything down and structure something so they can pick up on all those stories. And I think storytelling is really important when it comes to engagement and people wanting to listen more to a podcast. And if you ask somebody about something they're absolutely passionate about, they pretty much will just go off and go into verbal orbit, and that's what you want. You want them to talk in such a way where they are giving as much as they possibly can, and in a way which is which is colourful, which has almost like a tinge of an emotion, that there's a novel element to it as well. So people are learning something new. And I think also, I don't know, bringing out a few key things which are memorable. So throughout, any presentation, any lecture, you're only going to remember 2 or 3 things. You want more than that, really. So it's finding those little sort of side stories which you can then grow into something which could be a really good conversation. But a lot of podcasts are informative. That doesn't mean to say that you have to just spout out all that data. It has to almost be backed up with other elements. And I've spoken to you about this before, Brian, and it's a really interesting analogy. And, we can go back to Aristotle and the way he describes a good presentation. He says there's 3 elements to it. There's ethos, there's logos, and there's pathos. So ethos is your credibility. Logos is almost like your data, everything that sort of backs up what you're saying. And pathos is your passion. And you've got to have all 3. But Aristotle suggests that pathos has got to be about 60% of the sort of the ensemble. And I think that's what you need to do in your pre-production is, and you're doing your guest a favor here by trying to bring out the best in them. And that's why pre-production is everything. Preparation is everything. You need to do your guest a favor by making sure that they are going to shine brightly.
Again, linking it back to your time on TV, and I guess that more so the BBC are quite a bit naughty with this. It almost seems that they're there to challenge their guests. They kind of tee them up and they warm them up gently. Then it feels as a bit of a bear trap has been set for that person, and that they're almost looking for a bit of controversy, or they've got to be challenged, or the interviewer's got to kind of get one up on the guest. I don't know. It just seems that way it's going. It can be quite sparky. Is that planned? Is that deliberately done? That challenging your guest and pushing them to the limits to get a reaction, is that something that's deliberate that makes for a better podcast, a better interview, or is that just the nature of the beast and it sometimes just goes that way? I mean, what's your view on provoking a reaction on some of these interviews?
I think it's good to provoke a reaction, and sometimes it's good to throw in a real curveball to see how they respond, because you don't want something which is formulaic, prescriptive, but at the same time you want your guests to feel comfortable. But I think it's also important having a responsibility, a social responsibility for the people that you're interviewing, that you don't actually throw in anything there which is a minefield, which they're going to feel incredibly uncomfortable about, and they're going to shirk, and you'll never get another word out of them. And in fact, in my briefing notes that I write, I always write any minefields. Any minefields, and I ask them, is there anything that you just don't want to talk about? However, in television, that's exactly what they will do, because it's almost more about the person who's conducting the interview than the guest. They're the personality. That's why you come back week after week. Whereas I think for podcasting, it is different in a way. You want to hear what these people have to say, and you have to bring out the best in them.
No, again, a great answer. So let me put you on the spot. Who's the worst person you've interviewed on TV or on a podcast?
Do you know, I once interviewed Ellen MacArthur, who won the Vendée Globe around the world. She was just incredible. I was on St Catherine's Dock live on television for GMTV many, many years ago now, and she'd just won. She was so young, and she'd come off her boat, and I was there pointing a microphone in her face, and bless her, lights on her, and she just didn't want to. Why should she? Oh my God, she just spent, I don't know how long, a year or so on her own. And then I was asking the very basic questions which you need to during a breakfast television. You want to hear, what was it like? What was the worst thing? Were any surprises and all that? And she wasn't there. She was still on her boat. And it was an absolute, from my point of view, dog's dinner, because I was rubbish and I didn't bring out the best in her. So I think that was probably the most, but she did explain that she'd always been on a boat. I think she comes from Eastern England somewhere, and her and her dad used to, so that's all they did. But in fact, Ellen MacArthur's gone on to be the most incredible and prolific ambassador for the circular economy, and for persuading massive multinationals to actually change their ways and be better, to actually adopt sustainability on the highest level. So this woman she's incredible. She's one of my heroes. And I felt very privileged to meet her, but I was rubbish when I did, because I couldn't get anything out of her, because she didn't want to talk. She didn't. And in fact, if you see her on YouTube now, and I've recently gone back and watched some of her interviews, she takes everything back. She's so centered. She's so earthed, and she doesn't need to prove anything. She does it all because of her actions. So yes, that was one of my
no, thank you. I put you on the spot there. That was an unfair question. That's shocking. So look, again, so a takeaway from that, I think it's, we, especially in recruitment and marketing and the tech sector that we're in, there are big personalities, there's big people who really know their stuff. Would you advise people to look at media training? Would you advise people to try and get some coaching? Would you advise people to say, look, go and rehearse and practice your interview technique, because this is an amazing platform? Or is it a case, look, don't overthink it, just enjoy it? You might have one view, you might have 1 million views. It is what it is. Just put in the hours, put in the time, and you'll just naturally treat it as a conversation. I mean, what advice would you give to people who are thinking of YouTube, podcasting? Where do they begin?
That's really, I mean, there are so many aspects to that question. The key thing is practice makes perfect, but you're never going to be perfect. So always look at your next interview as the first time you've ever done anything like that, and prepare. Preparation, as I said, is absolutely everything. This week, I'm doing a one-to-one with you, where I'm in the comfort of my own office, and I know you really well. We've been really close for so many years now. We're really good friends. But then in 2 days' time, I'm hosting an event for the Cabinet Office in front of 1,000 people, where I've got 27 pages of script. But actually, to be honest, I've probably prepped about equally for both, because don't take anything for granted. However, saying that, when I talk about live broadcasts and pre-recorded, the issue is with pre-recorded is that after you've messed up once or twice, the third time you do a take, you're actually trying to remember what you've done before, which means you're not spontaneous, you're not bringing out your own personality, and you're not, I don't think, creating a lovely story which people want to engage in. You're just almost trying to do an exam in your head. And that's the best thing about live television. That's the best thing about doing a live interview, is that you have to think on your feet. But there is a skill to thinking on your feet. There is a skill to creating a pace which works for you. So another piece of advice is, I talk to myself all the time, but pace is everything and breathing is everything. So when I'm feeling very nervous, there's something that I do, which is like a box breathing method, where I inhale up for 4 in through my nose, and then I hold 4, and then I exhale. I'll say that again. I inhale for 4, I hold for 4, and then I exhale for 6 or 8. So you're exhaling more than you're inhaling, which actually has something to do with the composition of your oxygen, your carbon dioxide. But it reduces your stress levels completely within about 2 circular breaths. And it's amazing. And it's a brilliant skill to have, because your heart is up here. And then because you're breathing, it goes down to your diaphragm, and you can actually then start talking slower. So when someone's asking me a question, I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I going to answer this? I will breathe through my nose in that circular way, and it really slows down everything. And when your heart slows down, and you don't have to hear it in your ears anymore, you can start thinking. So that's another thing. So it's these sort of techniques that you need to be learning and adopting, like tapping your foot if you feel like you're talking too fast, and slowing down. People need to hear every word. And that's one important thing when you're in vision, because a lot of people have impaired hearing and are lip reading you. So don't talk, too fast because you just want to get it over and done with. Just remember that, a rhythm works very well, and people can then absorb your information and effectively make informed decisions about what you've said.
Yeah, no, look, brilliant. I will use that advice myself because I definitely suffer from that. You almost lose your breath when you're about to start or go on stage, and I've never known how to get rid of it. I'm fine after, like you say, a minute, but that first 30, 40 seconds, I'm just shaking. I just don't know how to control the adrenaline
Oh,
that's pumping through your body.
I still
So,
shake. I mean, when I'm on stage, I still go, "Why am I here?"
you're
Clare
really
Nasir,
doing
But
it
it,
for
but I
20
think I
years. You
recover a
can't
bit
still
better
do it.
now. But even so, we all
You
messed
cover it
up
all well.
occasionally.
So another thing, I think behavioural stuff, brilliant. I think the breathing, the tapping of the foot, and just getting on with it. We all have to just get comfortable with doing it. I think another thing is technology. So again, I remember the beginning of the pandemic. I'm used to seeing you on TV in a studio with all the lights, and then suddenly in the pandemic, I see you on TV in your garden, and I'm like, she's presenting live, and I swear that's Claire's garden. So technology has obviously rapidly changed. It's evolved. It's maybe way better than it was before. But just talk us through the kit that you use, because again, you present live to the nation, and it almost feels like you're doing it on a tripod with a small camera, because there's no way there's a camera crew in your house. So how does it work, and what kit would you recommend people could maybe use to get them started?
Sure. Okay. So initially during lockdown, I was just using a phone and a light because that's all we had. But very quickly, I realized I needed a higher quality of broadcasting. And now I have a proper studio kit and I use it all myself. There's no one else here apart from my dog, who actually occasionally nods in appreciation of the content that I'm delivering. So I've got a really good camera, a really good digital SLR camera, which I've learned how to use through YouTube and LinkedIn tutorials. And, it's troubleshooting. I've got excellent lighting. Lighting is everything, particularly when you're my age. I've got a green screen now, which is a brilliant one, which is a roller one, which extends across the whole of my studio in my own house. And my sound is excellent. So the most important thing, I think, Brian, is to make sure everything that you're using you can use well, and it is of as high quality as your budget permits. And that's two really key things. And do loads of tutorials. I've done so many through the years now, just to make sure that I'm up to speed with everything, and go back, have a look, edit, see if you can improve, and make sure the applications you use on editing are as good as the equipment you're using and your delivery.
Good, brilliant. Look, final question. I want my customers, clients, prospective clients to try and learn from you and I, and the way I'm trying to build this podcast, and you've done with your career, which is interviewing interesting people. Again, I think there's a fear sometimes you've got to talk to people from within the sector, talk to other recruiters, other people in the sector, recruit. It doesn't have to be that way. So I don't know if it's a question or if it's a statement, but again, for a couple of projects that you and I have worked on, I've asked you to come and be a guest speaker on my recruitment clients podcast. I've come and asked you to be a guest interviewer on my clients' recruitment, because you're an expert in climate change, you're an expert in meteorology, you're an expert in various different topics. So who are we as recruiters to try and pretend that we're the experts when maybe we can be the facilitator, we can be the platform? So I guess it's a part statement, part question, but again, what advice would you give about going out and finding people like you who, yes, you'll be want to be paid and you want some time to give up your expertise and knowledge, but surely it's a good thing that we go out beyond the recruitment sector and find experts like Claire to come and be a guest interviewer or a guest speaker on some of our podcasts.
Yes, I mean, you have to find somebody who really is interested in what you want to talk about. That's the key thing. It's very hard, I think, to be able to deliver an interview if your heart isn't really in it, because research is everything. Um, Understand your audience. Obviously, that's really key. Finding somebody who knows what you want to say as well, and I think that's really important. So I think that you can sort of divide the content of what you want to deliver through your the person who's going to be your sort of front of house or your mouthpiece. I think there's two things. First of all, about 75% of the content needs to be inspirational talk. It's sort of storytelling. It's helping to inspire others. And then I think 25% has to be about what your message is. And that has to be thread and intertwined through the show that you're doing. And I think that's the most important thing when you're bringing someone outside into your realm, is like, they've got to be on message. There's no point creating a podcast where it could be anyone talking about anything, which is just interesting. There has to be a almost like a baseline where people get that message. They understand the message. So even if there's 2 or 3 just key talking points or lines that you sort of filter into the conversation, so people know that there's almost like a, what do they call it? Oh God, what's that word, Brian? They can act on the information. So I think that's the key thing from my point of view, is listening to the client. Why do they want to do this? What's their top message? What are their main points? And why are they talking about this in the first place? Who are they trying to inspire? And let's get somebody in, let's get guests in who actually are a bit broader than the specific sectors that you're in, just so you can gain a better audience. You can extend your reach, because that's another thing. Your audience may be very specific, but I'm sure it can be broadened by bringing in people from beyond your specialism. So that's what I've been doing, really, is like just going out and almost cold calling and finding people who maybe haven't been suggested, but I know that they are on point, they're on message, and their takeaways are relevant to the client that I'm working for.
Brilliant. No, great answer. Final question, then I'm going to let you go. It would be unfair of me not to ask. It's December the 6th. Are we going to have a white Christmas?
Pretty much, yes. Hooray.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I know you're
Northern Scotland? Yes, absolutely. Milton Keynes, maybe not.
I'm from Cheshire. I'm posh now.
Yes,
no, I am. Scotland, no somewhere. But listen, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully people have got some good takeaways from this. I really appreciate you giving up your precious amount of time you've got. So thank you, and I will see you soon.
Brian, it's an absolute pleasure, and thanks for having me on.